Lopez. Ms. Gaines.
Good morning, Senators. My name is Riley Gaines. I'm an advisor for Independent Women's Voice. I recently graduated from the University of Kentucky, where I was a member of the UK's women's swim and dive team. I proudly finished my career as a 12-time NCAA All-American, a 5-time SEC champion, the SEC record holder in the 200 butterfly, making me one of the fastest Americans of all time, a 2-time Olympic trial qualifier, SEC Scholar Athlete of the Year, and SEC Community Service Leader of the Year. But all of that to say that it's a lifelong journey competing at that level, and it's impossible to put into words the amount of sacrifice and dedication that it takes. On March 17th of 2022, my teammates and I, as well as female swimmers from universities around the country, were forced to compete against biological male Lia Thomas. Thomas was allowed to compete in the women's division after competing as a member of the University of Pennsylvania's men's swim team for 3 years as Will Thomas. We watched on the side of the pool as Thomas swam to a national title in the 500 freestyle, beating out the most impressive and accomplished female swimmers in the country, including many Olympians and American record holders, by body lengths. Previously, Thomas had been ranked 462nd at best in the men's division the year prior. The next day, I raced Thomas in the 200 freestyle, which ended up in a tie. We went the exact same time down to the 100th of a second. Having only one trophy, the NCAA handed it to Thomas and told me I had to go home empty-handed. And when I asked why, which was a question they were not prepared to be asked, I actually appreciate their honesty because they said, Thomas, it was crucial. Thomas had it for picture purposes. Thomas had to have it for the pictures. I felt betrayed. I felt belittled. I felt reduced to a photo op. But my feelings didn't matter. What mattered to the NCAA were the feelings of a biological male. In 1972, Congress enacted Title IX to end unjust sex discrimination in all aspects of education, including college athletics. But by allowing Thomas to displace female athletes in the pool and on the podium, the NCAA intentionally and explicitly discriminated on the basis of sex. Although the NCAA claimed it acted in the name of inclusion, its policies in fact excluded female athletes, which are the very female athletes whom Title IX was passed to protect. But that is not all. In addition to being forced to give up our awards and our titles and our opportunities, the NCAA forced me and my female swimmers to share a locker room with Thomas, a 6'4", 22-year-old male equipped with and exposing male genitalia. Let me be clear about this. We were not forewarned we would be sharing a locker room. No one asked for our consent, and we did not give our consent. And I'll set the scene. A swimming locker room is not a place of modesty. You're undressing, you're fully exposed, and we were forced to take off our swimsuit in front of a man who was doing the exact same thing. If nothing else, I truly hope how you can see this as a violation of our right to privacy, and how some of us have felt uncomfortable, embarrassed, and even traumatized by this experience. I know that I don't speak for every single person who competed against Lia Thomas, but I know I speak for many because I saw the tears. I saw the tears from the 9th and 17th place finishers who missed out on being named an All-American by 1 place. And I can attest to the extreme discomfort in the locker room from these 18 to 22-year-old girls, when you turn around and there's male eyes watching in that same room. And I can attest to the whispers and the grumbles of anger and frustration from these girls who, just like myself, had worked our entire lives to get to this meet. And I can attest to the fact that around the country, these female athletes who opposed the inclusion of Lia Thomas in the women's divisions were threatened, intimidated, and emotionally blackmailed into silence and submission. But unfortunately, our experiences are not unique. The number of female athletes who have been denied opportunities, traumatized, or hurt by policies that claim to promote inclusion is growing at an alarming rate. I hear these female athletes and their parents. I hear from these people who are seriously injured, one with permanent injuries that will plague the rest of her life because she was forced to compete against a much physically stronger man. This is unacceptable, and the integrity of women's sports is lost. It's unfair, it's discriminatory, and it must stop. Women's rights to privacy, single-sex spaces, and opportunities are being encroached on. Sports, sororities, locker rooms, dorm rooms, shelters, prisons. Some have tried to tar those of us speaking up for women's safety, security, and opportunities as transphobic or bigoted, and this is untrue. I've heard from people within this community, gay, lesbian, and trans-identifying Americans, that agree females should not be asked to step aside and make room for male-bodied individuals no matter how they identify. Defending women's rights is not anti-anyone. Believing in biology is not bigoted. And following the science that there are only 2 sexes and that there are very real and important differences between the 2 sexes is not hateful, it's fact. I'll end with a quote very briefly from tennis legend Martina Navratilova. There will always be significant numbers of boys and men who would beat the best girls and women in head-to-head competition. Claims to the contrary are simply a denial of science. I thank you guys for listening, and I truly hope you heard my story.
Thank you, Ms. Gaines.
It was a moment heavy with silence. The room seemed to hold its breath as Riley Gaines's voice cracked, not from weakness, but from something deeper. Conviction, pain, a raw, unfiltered truth echoing through the marble chambers of the United States Senate. Her eyes glistened as she spoke of what no athlete expects to endure. Not defeat, not exhaustion, but humiliation disguised as fairness. She wasn't just describing a race. She was recounting a betrayal. In that hearing room, as senators shifted in their chairs, Riley Gaines spoke for an entire generation of young women who trained in the dark, bled in silence, and sacrificed everything for the chance to compete, only to be told that biology no longer mattered. That fairness was now subjective, that standing up for women's rights could make you an enemy of progress. But what happened in that moment wasn't just about swimming. It was about power, about institutions that preach equality but practice appeasement, about governing bodies so consumed by ideology that they've forgotten the very women Title IX was written to protect. She told them, clearly, calmly, and with courage, that she and her teammates were forced to undress in front of a biological male. No consent, no warning, just compliance. She used words that once would have shaken the conscience of any civil rights committee. Violated, uncomfortable, embarrassed, traumatized. And yet, even in that setting, surrounded by lawmakers sworn to defend justice, her testimony was met not with outrage, but with calculation, the kind of quiet political silence that speaks volumes. What Riley Gaines described was more than a policy failure. It was a moral one. When an organization like the NCAA tells a woman that her trophy doesn't matter, that her title doesn't matter, that her privacy doesn't matter, all for the sake of a photograph, it reveals something chilling about the times we live in. We are witnessing the slow erosion of reason under the weight of ideology. We are seeing the line between inclusion and injustice blur beyond recognition. The truth Riley told is not complicated. She trained, she competed, she earned her place. And then she watched as the rules changed, not for fairness, but for optics. When she tied Lia Thomas, she was told the male athlete would hold the trophy for picture purposes. It wasn't about victory, it was about narrative. It wasn't about equality, it was about control. And in that single exchange, the mask of bureaucracy slipped. For just a moment, we saw the machinery behind the curtain, a system that has decided who may speak, who must stay silent, and who will be sacrificed for the illusion of progress. What does it say about a country when telling the truth becomes controversial? When a young woman describing her own experience, her discomfort, her boundaries, her reality, is labeled hateful simply because it doesn't align with an approved ideology? America has always been a nation built on uncomfortable truths. It is how we grow, how we correct, how we hold power to account. But somewhere along the way, the word truth itself became negotiable. Riley Gaines stood before Congress not as a partisan, not as a provocateur, but as an athlete asking a question every fair-minded American should be able to answer. When did women's rights become conditional? The cameras caught her steady voice trembling only once when she described the locker room. 18 to 22-year-old girls, stripped of privacy, stripped of protection, told to stay silent or risk their careers. In that image lies the heart of this debate. Not hatred, not politics, but dignity. There are moments in history when testimony transcends politics, when a voice cuts through the noise and forces a nation to look at itself. This was one of those moments, because what Riley Gaines revealed was not just about sports, it was about the state of truth itself. About a country where policy has drifted so far from principle that courage now looks like rebellion. Title IX was written to ensure equality, not erase it. It was designed to give women a fair shot, not to make them second-class citizens in their own arenas. And when the institutions entrusted with those ideals turn away, the burden of truth falls on the shoulders of those willing to stand alone, people like Riley Gaines. She reminded us that believing in biology is not bigotry, that defending fairness is not hatred, that truth, however inconvenient, still matters. In a time when ideology tries to silence science, when words like woman and female are treated like political weapons instead of biological facts, her testimony stands as both warning and beacon. Because if we cannot tell the truth in the halls of Congress, where can we tell it? If we cannot defend fairness for women in the one place designed to protect their rights, what justice is left to protect? As her words faded and the gavel struck, the question lingered in the air, not just for senators, but for all of us. Will we continue to trade truth for comfort? Or will we find the courage to face reality even when it's inconvenient? The story of America has never been written by those who stayed silent. It has always been written by those who spoke when speaking came with a cost. Riley Gaines paid that cost, and in doing so, she reminded this country that freedom, real freedom, begins where fear ends. This hearing may fade from the headlines. The arguments will move on to the next committee room, the next debate, the next controversy. But long after the cameras shut off, the echo of her voice remains, a quiet demand for fairness, for courage, for truth. Because when we protect truth, we protect everyone. And in that, there is no left or right, only right and wrong. This is the fight for fairness, the fight for women, the fight for integrity in a nation that seems to be forgetting what those words mean. The question now is not whether Riley Gaines will be remembered. The question is whether we, as a country, will remember what she stood for justice, for truth, for freedom. This has been Liberal Freedom. Subscribe, stand with us, and help us keep the light on truth, because the fight for fairness is far from over.